I wanted to go back to the decision to send cluster munitions to Ukraine. I'm interested in what responses the administration has heard from from allies and from other countries, noting that the Prime Minister of Cambodia, for example, who, a country that's dealt with a lot of unexploded ordnance from American bombing. Hun Sen came out and basically appealed for the Ukrainians not to use these weapons, saying Ukrainians will suffer in the long term. I know several other countries have raised these concerns, and specifically under the convention that the US is not a signatory to, but a lot of countries are a signatory to, on cluster munitions, does require them to make efforts to discourage other countries from not using them. So I'm wondering if you could sort of talk us through what diplomatic outreach you've heard from other countries, specifically. Have there been notifications from other countries that are signatories to the convention, either before or after the decision was made public, asking the US not to go ahead with this?
What I'll say is that we consulted closely with our allies and partners on this decision. I'm not going to detail all of those conversations, but we don't believe, based on those conversations, we don't believe that the decision will impact support for Ukraine from around the globe. And I just want to reiterate something that the National Security Advisor spoke to when he was at the White House podium on Friday, which is that this was a very difficult decision for the administration. It was a difficult decision for people in this department. It was a difficult decision, I know, for the president, based on what the National Security Advisor said. And it was a decision that we made based on a number of circumstances. Number one, the fact that Ukraine is in the middle of a counteroffensive that requires an enormous amount of artillery. And that they are at a point where they are running low on the type of artillery artillery rounds that they need, and we needed to bridge the period from when they will run low on those stocks to when we can provide them with new stocks based on the manufacturing that we've turned on both here and abroad in the past number of months. And so we were faced with the decision of either allowing Ukraine to run low or potentially run out of ammunition, and seeing the Russians, which have used cluster bombs with much higher dud rates than the ones that we're providing them to the Ukrainians, 40% or so versus 2.5% the ones that we're providing, have seen them use them against not just military targets but against civilian targets. We ran the risk of allowing them, leaving the Ukrainians without the ability to defend themselves against those munitions versus providing them these munitions with some very serious assurances that we got from the Ukrainians. Number one, most importantly, that they would use these only against military targets, that they wouldn't use them against civilian populations, which of course makes sense because the civilian population we're talking about are Ukrainians. And number two, that they would conduct extensive demining operations at the conclusion of these hostilities, something that we will support them in. And I think notably something that they were already going to have to do anyway, because as I noted, Russia has been using cluster bombs since the outset of this war, cluster bombs with a high dud rate. So the Ukrainians are at some point going to have to conduct these demining operations already. So when you weighed the kind of both sides of the ledger of this, that it did make sense to us, still a difficult decision, but it did make sense to us to provide these weapons. It's something we've consulted with allies and partners, and we understand that different countries will come to different conclusions.
Okay, can you confirm that some countries have made those specific notifications, say, under the convention, we're discouraging you from doing this?
I will say that we've had I don't want to confirm that specifically because I'm not aware of the details of any specific notifications, but I will say we've had a number of conversations with countries, and there are countries that have made their position known publicly. But as I said, we do not believe this is an issue that is going to crack the unity that we've had with our allies and partners.